So now that we have our hands dirty with launching our very first EC2 instance, which was AWS's Linux instance, let's try our luck with launching a Windows Server AMI. Back in our EC2 dashboard, we see that we still have our Linux server running. So let's just click on Launch Instance. Before we give our server a name, let's go ahead and select the proper AMI. Let's highlight Windows, and you can see here that it's free tier eligible as well. T2 micro, of course. Now let's take a look at these, and we see the difference that one has less memory than others out of the two free tier eligible. So we'll stick with the T2 micro here. We'll name this one Windows-Server. You can see also there's a Mac OS AMI, as we noted it was recently added to the portfolio. We'll come on down to the network settings and click on Edit. Again, we'll pick the default VPC, the one that we created, and we'll place this one in the public 1B subnet. We'll enable the auto-assign public IP selection, and we'll create a new security group. This one we'll name Windows-SG. We'll copy that name and paste it in the description. Now, Windows uses a different protocol, RDP, which is port 3389, to manage the server. Just like we did for our Linux security group, we'll change the source type to MyIP and give it a description. Once you're all done there, we'll check on the configurations for storage. And again, we'll leave this as the default. Now let's simply launch this instance. But we forgot to create our key pair. So let's go ahead and do that now. We'll name this one Windows-Key and click on Create Key Pair to download that PIM file. We'll see that logging in with the Windows device is going to be a little bit different than with a Linux device. After we've downloaded our key pair, let's go ahead and click on Launch Instance to deploy our Windows server. Then of course, click on View All Instances. And we can see here that of course our Linux server is up and running if you left it running, and our Windows server is initializing, but it already has been auto-assigned a public IP address, which is pretty cool. We'll wait for the status checks to of course complete here so that we can access our device. We see that we created a tag for the name of our device, and of course monitoring. It's going to take a while to populate those metrics, but let's go ahead and give it a moment. All right, so it looks like our instance has passed both checks. So now let's go ahead and make sure that our instance is selected and then click on Connect. Once we've done that, we need to get the password so that we can RDP into it. And we can do that by clicking on Get Password. So let's go ahead and choose File and navigate to that PIM file. Once we have that, click Decrypt Password. And this long doozy of a password here is what we're going to need to get logged in. So back in our Mobaxterm, let's click on Session, and instead of SSH, click RDP. We're going to need to grab that public IP address from the console. So let's go ahead and copy that. We'll paste it into remote host. Now hitting OK here, we see that the username is Andre King, so that's not what we need. But we'll go ahead and let that load up in the background so that it'll prompt us here. If we hit more choices, we can use a different account. And again, we need to type administrator for the username and make sure that the A is uppercase. Copy that long password and paste it in here. I'll select Remember Me. And so now we're going to have an RDP session to our very first Windows server here. You may or may not be familiar with Windows servers, but to the naked eye, it may look just like a desktop session for a normal Windows computer. But we'll see here in just a minute that it actually has a server operating system. But let's just give it a moment to be all the way up and running. Now that it's up and running, we can see details about this instance, such as the host name, the instance ID, of course, both IP addresses, private and public, the instance size, availability zone, and a few other attributes here. Now that network load and moderate that we chose for the free tier eligible, it's going to constrain us a bit here, and as it's just using 1 gig of memory and 1 virtual CPU. But that's enough to just get familiar with launching this instance. But let's check out the network settings. In the system tray, we'll click on this icon, choose network and internet settings, change adapter options, double click here, and when we click details. Now in our last module, when we set up the VPC infrastructure, we talked about the reserved IP addresses that AWS has. And we can see here that the default gateway, the last octet being .65, is the second IP address of that subnet. And for the DNS server, it is using the third IP address of the VPC. So let's go ahead and close out of there. Now let's click on the icon for the Edge browser and let this page load. We'll open a new tab and go to speedtest.net. We'll hit go here. And we just want to gather the details of the download and upload speeds for this free tier Windows server. We'll give it a few seconds to run its tests. And we can see here that the upload speed is actually almost 10 times that of the download speed, but 46, 47 megs down is still not that bad. And in my opinion, it's more than adequate for a free tier server. Now I'm going to open another tab and just navigate to ESPN. And we can see here, outbound traffic looks good. Now to prove that this is actually a server, let's go ahead and click on what used to be the start button. And let's select Server Manager. Now, if we click Add Rows and Features, we get a prompt that says Server Manager is collecting inventory data. The wizard will be available after data collection finishes. So even if we go ahead and expand all servers, we still are going to have to wait until the server is done fully fetching its data. So great job deploying your very first Windows server as well as your first Linux server. If you're all done, go ahead and highlight both servers and then go ahead and shut them down so that you can preserve your free tier hours. But again, great job, superstar, and I'll see you in the next video.